Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Doc Padama. This time we will be criticizing and analyzing the poem of Dylan Thomas entitled Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, implementing the elements of literary criticism that was discussed in our previous video, namely characters, theme, plot, setting, conflict, and resolution. So all of this will be used as a guide in analyzing and criticizing this particular specific poem by Dylan Thomas. Let's start with the title. Do not go gentle into that good night. During this time, this is what we call untitled poem because usually the title that they use, by the way, we will be using English and Filipino during the course of discussion for this particular video. So during that time, they usually do not give titles to the poem. That is why the first line of the poem is carried over as the title of the poem. So as you can see, the first line of the poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, is carried over as the title of the poem. Okay, now let's first identify the characters, the first element for this particular poem. Okay, as you can see, it only has six stanzas, 4, 5, and 6 stanzas. So we can easily identify the characters supposed to be because it is a very short literary piece, a very short poem. So supposedly you can easily identify the characters for this particular literary piece. And if we are going to answer the first element regarding or referring to the characters in the poem, you can observe that it is not that quite easy. Hindi ganun kadali ma-identify kahit na maiksi lang yung literary piece. But based on the following, here, this is in the form of a conversation. Somebody is talking to someone. Okay? So since we are critiquing a poem, a poetry, it would be obvious that the first character, the first person in this particular literary piece would be the author. So the first character will be Dylan Thomas, the author. Okay? So we're referring to the first element, which is the characters. Okay. The author. And then there is another character, another person whom the author is talking to. Merong kausap yung author natin. And this can be seen, let's try to label the stanza. So this is stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4, 5, and stanza 6. Going back to our discussion, the second character in this particular literary piece can be identified in the last stanza, which is this one. So if we're going to read the last stanza and try to see if you can identify the last character. So there are only two characters. Okay? And you, my father, there on that sad height. Actually, it's on the first line of the last stanza. So obviously, it is the father of whom? Who is talking? The author. The father of Dylan Thomas is the second character. The father of the author. Okay, so we already have an idea of the setting of the story. It is a conversation between the author, which is considered as the son, and the father of the author. Okay, to continue, the second element, which is the theme. The theme of this particular literary piece can already be identified through the title. So let's analyze the title. So do not go gentle into that good night. Okay, night. All most of the words used in this particular literary piece uses symbolism. Okay? So focus on the symbolisms of the following words. So we are analyzing the title. This one, do not go gentle into that good night. So if we're going to analyze the title and start with the last word, night. Night would refer to what? So if you are going to use night as a symbol, night would usually refer to darkness, and darkness refers to nothingness, and nothingness refers to lifelessness. Walang buhay, kawalan, dilim. So usually this particular description that I mentioned, lahat ng mga bagay, yung adjectives na binanggit ko refers to, it boils down to death. Okay? So that is what we are going to assign for that particular word, which is night. Okay, let's zoom in. The next is the adjective of night, the adjective of death, which is good. Okay? What is good about death? Di ba? It is not connected with the word night, like good night. It is an adjective that describes night. Okay? Now the question is, why did they use the adjective good referring to night, which is equivalent to death? Is there something good in dying or in death? Actually, there is. And usually it is written in the tombstones of people who have already died. There are 2 points that you can get from what is written in the tombstone. Yung nakalagay doon sa anong tawag doon sa bato na kapag namatay, 'di ba? Usually nakalagay doon is RIP, rest in peace. So there are already 2 points that you can get from that one, the tombstone. In death there is rest. Let's put it here. And there is peace. Okay, and then we are going to put all of this together once we've also already deciphered the other parts of the title, so we can identify the theme of this particular literary piece. The next part of the title that we're going to analyze is on the initial part of the title, okay, which is do not. When you say do not go there, do not do this, do not disobey this one, okay? It is a form of a sentence that usually connotes a command, okay? So when we use the phrase do not, or the words do and not in a phrase or in a sentence, it usually connotes or directs a command. So if it is a command, there are 2 elements that is needed. Kapag yan ay utos, meron 2 elemento na kailangan present sa isang command. And these are what? The one giving the command, the source of the command, and the one being commanded. Yung inuutusan, yung naguutos at inuutusan. Okay, now before we go on to that, those 2 elements, let's proceed with the other parts, okay? But we are going to go back to these 2 parts or these 2 elements of with regard to the word command, okay? The next is go gentle, okay? Gentle, let's use gentle. So when you look for the definition of gentle, this refers to something that is done with kindness, with care. Okay, so ibig sabihin mahinahon, hindi yung magaspang o magaslaw o hindi agresibo. Okay? So that is what we use when we define gentle. So you do not need to be aggressive kapag ikaw ay gentle. So when you are doing things gently in this particular word, This is used to symbolize what? The most direct word that we can use is to give up or to surrender. You do not fight anymore. That is why the word gentle was used, surrender. Okay, now that we have already placed the meaning of these symbols that were used in the title, we can answer the last part, which is the one giving the command and the one who is being commanded. Yung nag-uutos at sino yung nag-uutos. Let's try to put the ideas together based on the um, simplified terms referring to the symbols that were used in the title. So somebody is giving a command, which is do not. Okay, do not what? Do not surrender. Do not surrender into what? Into death, even if death means rest and peace. Okay, now with this in mind, pagkatapos niyong malaman ito ngayon, sino sa palagay ninyo dito sa dalawang character ang nagbibigay ng command? The source of the command. Is it the author or the father? Is it the son commanding the father or the father commanding the son? So sabi natin dito, merong namamatay o merong malapit ng mamatay. Somebody is nearing death. Okay? So in this particular part, we can again refer to the last stanza. Sino ba yung malapit ng mamatay? According to the last stanza, and you, my father, there on that sad height, dyan sa malungkot mong kalagayan, which is near death. Okay? So here, we can already establish that the son, Dylan Thomas, is giving, let's use this blue one. So this one, the son is giving a command to his father not to surrender to death, even if death means rest and peace, even if the father already wants to die because the father wants to rest and wants to have peace. So basically, from this analysis of the title, you will already have an overview, a bird's eye view perspective of uh, what will be presented in this particular literary piece. So that the rest will be discussed stanza per stanza on how Dylan Thomas, the son, convinced his father not to give in to death. Before we continue, I would like to make a correction on this part of our discussion. So instead of this particular spelling on author, it should be this one. So I will not be able to include this in the preceding part of our video. So I'm asking for your understanding. Thank you very much, everyone. And let's continue our discussion. Now, to continue, before we proceed with the analysis of the other stanza, I would like you to implement the pre-reading stage for this particular literary piece and try to observe repetitions and patterns in how this literary piece was written. Ano yung mga nakikita niyong paulit-ulit o merong pattern na nangyayari dito sa pagsusulat ng tula ni Dylan Thomas? Example, if you're going to observe, rage, rage against the dying of the light is repeated in other stanzas. So let's mark that here. How many times was this particular line repeated? And let's use the blue one. So rage, rage against the dying of the light is there. And this one was repeated there. And it was repeated there. And it was repeated again. So there is something in that particular line that is why it keeps showing up in the different stanza. Aside from that, there is another line which is do not go gentle into that good night, which is the title. Again, it appeared here, do not go gentle into that good night. And then another one, do not go gentle into that good night. And in the last stanza, it was again presented, do not go gentle into that good night. So this is what we will be analyzing right now. What does do not go gentle into that good night means, which is represented here, okay? So this one will use the red one, and the other one is rage, rage against the dying of the light. So that is the color code that we will be using. So do not go gentle. Actually, this is already the title. Do not go gentle into that good night refers to what we earlier discussed. Dylan Thomas commanding his father, asking his father not to give into death. So it's as simple as that. Okay, so that's already the first line. We've already established that. Now, the second line, which is rage, rage against the dying of the light. Rage is the opposite of gentle. Rage is to be aggressive, to fight. Okay? When you are in rage, you are not just angry. It is beyond being angry. Hindi ka lang galit, 'di ba? Galit na galit. Magwawala ka na dahil sa galit. Okay? So that is the meaning of rage by definition. And by its symbol, rage refers to when you fight. Okay? When you do not give in, you rage. Kapag hindi ka susuko, you rage. So, kapag ginamit, when this particular word is used, rage, rage, kailangan ang palagi nyong naiisip is to fight, fight. Somebody is asking or encouraging someone to fight. And in this case, Dylan Thomas is encouraging his father to not give in to death and to fight. Rage, rage. Parang chinincheer niya yung kanyang father. Rage, 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 rage. Against what? So based on the other part of this particular line, rage, rage against the dying of the light. The dying of the light. Dying of the light refers to near death. I hope you take that down. Take note. Okay? So I'll try to see if I can put it here. So when you talk about rage, this one again refers to fight. And dying of the light refers to near death. Near death. Why near death? Dying of the light. Yung pagkawala, nawawala pa lang yung ilaw. Pawala pa lang yung ilaw. That is why it is referred to near death. You fight against dying. Okay? Death is different from dying. Okay. So now that we have also established that, you already have an idea once we go through the different stanzas and encounter these particular lines that we again have decoded for you to be able to get a view, get a perspective, an image of what is going on in the conversation of the son, Dylan Thomas, and his father. Okay, to continue, before we can answer all of the elements of literary criticism, we are going to go through the different stanzas of the poem. So with stanza 1, do not go gentle into that good night, which was already decoded earlier. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. So what do we mean by rave? So we can use the word rave as part of our vocabulary. So when you talk about rave, this refers to something that is done wildly. Okay? So when you attend a rave party, it usually connotes a wild party. Okay? So going back to that particular line, old age, which is the age of the father of Dylan Thomas, should burn, meaning it should be active, Burn refers to, let's use that again and add that in our vocabulary. Burn refers to being active. Okay, so let's underline the vocabulary words that we used. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Close of day is the ending of a day. Close of day. So this is almost the same as referring to old age. Okay? So close of day refers to old age. So let's go back to the second line or in the first stanza. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. So this is already self-explanatory since we have already given uh, words that would explain the symbols that were used in this particular line, and then rage against the dying of the light. So in this particular stanza, Dylan Thomas has opened his poem by talking to his father and reminding his father, pinapaalalahanan niya yung kanyang tatay na kahit na matanda na ang isang tao, hindi ibig sabihin, wala ka ng karapatang gumalaw, mamasyal, at gawin yung gusto mong gawin. Okay? So basically, that is the thought behind stanza. Okay, on the second stanza, let's read it first before we analyze. The wise men at their end, no dark is right, because their words at forth no lightning day. Do not go gentle into that good night. It is in this stanza, starting with stanza 2, stanza 3, stanza 4, and stanza 5, where Dylan Thomas presented the four types of men. And who are they? Let's write it down so we will have an idea of the following. So number one is wise men. This is under stanza 2. The next one is good men. The next one is grave men. Good men, wild men. And then the last one under stanza 5, you have grave men. Okay, so this is what we will be doing. We are just going to present the equivalent meaning of the following men, because if we're going to look at the pattern that was used in the conversation of Dylan Thomas is using these types of men to convince his father not to give in to that. That is why it would be simpler for us to see and to look at the bigger picture of this particular conversation if we just identify who are these men. Ano bang mga klaseng tao itong ginagamit ni Dylan Thomas para makumbinsi niya ang kanyang tatay na wag sumuko sa kamatayan. So number one, let's start with wise men under the second stanza. The wise men at their end, no dark is right. Meaning, wise men are people who are literally wise. Okay? Ito yung mga taong matatalino. Okay? So, these people, with their intellect, know dark is right, meaning death will come. Death is inevitable. Ano ibig sabihin inevitable? Whether you like it or not, we will have to pay the price of death. Kailangan talagang lahat ng tao, wala tayong magagawa, kailangang mamatay. So, that is the meaning of the first line. Because their words are forth no lightning day. Kahit na anong talino nila, kahit na anong galing nila, whether they like it or not, these wise men will still die. Okay? So, let's use wise men as people who are knowledgeable, intellectual. Okay? Okay. endowed with knowledge. Ibig sabihin talagang meron silang kaalaman, expert sila doon sa area nila. So even if they are wise, they still rage against the dying of the light. Even if they know that they will die someday, these people, wise men, do not give up. They still rage against the dying of the light. So, itong mga matatalinong tao, they do not go gentle into that good night. They refuse to die. They fight against death. So, ganun yung uh, style ng presentation ni Dylan Thomas sa kanyang father during this particular conversation. And then, the next stanza referring to good men. So who are these good men? Good men are the righteous men. So these are the righteous. So let's read this stanza. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright. Their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So again, if we're going to summarize this, even if they have done a lot of good, kahit na marami silang nagawang magagandang bagay because they are considered righteous and they know that they will die, they still fight against death. So even if you are already assured that since you have done good things, you know when you die, pupunta ka naman sa heaven kasi ang dami mong ginawang mabuti, there is still part of them that would like to live and therefore fight against death. And therefore, they rage against the dying of the light. Sino sila? Sila yung good men. Okay, the next one, under stanza 4, are the wild men. The wild men is the counterpart of the righteous men. They are the sinners. Okay? So, under this particular stanza, let's read, wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late. Ito yung mga marami na silang ginawang hindi maganda, marami na silang maling nagawa, and learned too late, they grieved it on its way. Nagsisi naman sila, pero, di ba, kahit na ganon, kahit na alam nilang pag namatay sila, alam nila kung saan sila pupunta dahil sa kanilang katangian, which is they are considered sinners, they still fight against dying. So parang sinasabi ni Dylan Thomas sa kanyang tatay, if we're going to paint an image of the conversation, look at these people, Father. Some of them are righteous, some of them are sinners, some of them are intellectuals, but still, all of them fight against death. Hindi pa tapos yung conversation. There is still the last stanza, which is grave men. So, grave men refers to the people who are dying, who are ill. Ito yung mga terminal na. Ito yung alam na nilang mamamatay na sila. Meron ng taning ang kanilang buhay. So, that is what we mean by people who have terminal illness or diseases. Okay? So, these are people who are dying. So, let's read stanza number 5. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Even the dying still fight against death. Okay? And then the last stanza. And you, after mentioning all of these people, okay, generally they are people. Okay? After mentioning all of them, Dylan Thomas, binalingan niya naman yung kanyang tatay. And you, my father, there on that sad height, yung kalagayan niyang malapit ng mamatay. Curse, bless me now. What is the meaning of curse and bless? Curse and bless. So again, this is another symbolism. Curse and bless is not the same. So when you curse, you say something bad. When you bless, you say something good, which is counterpart of these words. Why is Dylan Thomas asking his father to curse him or bless him? Parang sinasabi ni Dylan Thomas dito sa kanilang pag-uusap na, Father, tatay ko, sabihan mo ako ng masama, sabihan mo ako ng mabuti. Okay, to put it simply, okay? Tell me anything whether good or bad. Why is Dylan Thomas asking his father to do this? Even if it is bad, kahit na masama yung lumabas sa bibig mo, sabihan mo ko. It is in this point, for this particular reason, that Dylan Thomas already saw his father not speaking. And therefore, his father, at this particular point, has already passed away. Namatay na yung tatay niya. So this is equivalent and tantamount to what you watch in movies and telenovelas na kapag namatay ang isang tao na malapit sa'yo, you try to wake them up. Niyuyug-yug nyo sila. You shake them and you talk to them. Diba? Sinisigawan nyo sila to the point na, talk to me. Tell me anything. You are forcing them to talk because they have already passed away and you are in denial na wala na sila. So this is the way of the author saying that he is trying to talk to his father kahit na alam niyang patay na yung tatay niya. Curse, bless me now with your tears, I pray. He is fervently praying na sana makapagsalita pa yung tatay niya. And then the last two lines in the last stanza, do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dying of the light. So here, even if his father is already dead, Dylan Thomas is still trying to encourage his father, even if it is futile. Kahit na alam niyang wala nang silbi, in-encourage niya pa rin yung tatay niya na, tay, lumaban ka. Now, to complete our elements of literary criticism, the second one is what we call the theme. So, based on our discussion, what do you think is the theme, the main theme, the subject or the topic of this particular poem or literary piece written by Dylan Thomas? So, we can already write here that the theme is about death or dying. And then after that, you have to discuss why. Why is it death or dying? Death or dying. And then you have to discuss why. You have to explain why is it death or dying. And then the third one is the plot. So the plot is the sequence of events that transpired during that particular literary piece, the sequence of events. So you can already write what were the events that transpired. So based on our discussion that were presented in the form of these stanzas, you can already give your idea of what transpired during this particular conversation of Dylan Thomas and his father. So that is number 3. And then number 4, the setting is already can already be speculated. So this can be presented in a setting, or you can do your research whether the setting transpired in a hospital or in the private room of the father of Dylan Thomas. So again, you have to do your research in order to justify the setting of the story where it happened. So that is what we mean by the setting. Okay, and then the conflict usually is not just the argument that transpired during a particular story. So in this case, when we talk about conflict, this refers to the most exciting part of the literary piece. So this is what we usually call the climax. So if we're going to identify the climax of the story, but this should also be your part. So personally, for me, the climax would be the last part, which is stanza 6. And then you have to explain why stanza 6 for you is the climax. Again, you can choose other parts of the literary piece. So climax cannot be standardized, cannot be set in a particular stanza. This would be subjective based on how you understand the definition of climax and how you identify the climax in the literary piece. So again, it can either be the last stanza, the middle stanza, the first stanza, and then you have to present your justification. This is the important part. If that is the climax, then justify, explain why this is considered as the climax for you. Okay? So, after presenting the setting, the conflict, and then the resolution is how the story ended, how it was resolved. So, how did the story end? You just present. So, this refers to the resolution, how the argument, how the conflict was resolved towards the end of the literary piece. So, again, you just need to narrate and discuss how the story ended and how it closed. So I hope you were able to learn something from this short literary criticism of the poem of Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, and whatever strategy and approach that we used in this particular literary criticism will be implemented and carried over to the other literary pieces that will be assigned to you. So I hope you go through, you go back to how this particular story was criticized so that you will have an idea of what to do in the next assigned literary piece or assigned reading for your respective subject. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and God bless, and I will see you again in our next video discussion. Bye!